Hello and good day. My name is Carmen Turner and I'm a course mentor. And I'd like to share a little bit of research with you regarding culture and second language learning, and hopefully generate some discussion about the implications of culture in the language classroom. So, when we think of culture, what comes to mind? The term culture is pervasive in our public discourse. We encounter it all the time in educational literature. You might think of culture in terms of pop culture when we think of what's happening in popular culture, music, fashion trends, political ideas, even our media and TV are saturated with um, icons or representations of our popular culture. You might think of a specific national or ethnic culture or a regional culture. And we know that culture encompasses all of what is on this particular slide. It includes our values, our attitudes, beliefs, and customs. It may even influence how we view authority, what we consider an appropriate communication style, and even our perceptions of our gender roles. So, culture is truly something that influences all of us, and it can be a positive because it's really a means of survival for a group, that shared pattern of beliefs. So, sociologists and anthropologists have given us this definition of culture. They call it a blueprint that guides our behavior. And we know that that blueprint is first passed on to us and our families. And then we know that the larger society reinforces those cultural norms. So, our neighbors, our teachers, the coaches, people in our community and society. I'll give you an example, a personal example. Um, I was born and raised in the South and continue to live here. And we have a tradition of using sir and ma'am. Teach your children to use it when they're addressing adults, and even adults use it when talking with someone older than they are. And the tradition is that you use this term, yes sir, yes ma'am, as a sign of respect. So it really is a group behavior that most Southerners employ. And if a child fails to use it or an adult fails to use it when referring to a senior, they almost get a look like, don't you know better? Don't you know how to be respectful? So there's this attitude that using sir or ma'am is a sign of respect. Um, Interestingly, though, culture is not stable or fixed. It can be dynamic and it can evolve over time. And I am observing this very thing when it comes to this practice of using sir or ma'am. And it may be because we have individuals from the West Coast, the Midwest, the East Coast moving to the South, and this tradition is not something that they are necessarily familiar with. And perhaps as Southerners leave and come back, this habit is beginning to fade just a bit. And I think many diehard Southerners are beginning to rethink this notion of sir and ma'am and the fact that you can show great respect without using it. And the use of it does not mean that you're necessarily respectful because you could use those terms and still not be a respectful individual. So, culture is fostered in the family and society, it influences about things, our behavior. It's shared by a group and it can change over time. It is not um, static. All right, so this slide, I think, is a great warning for all of us. It says, caution, image and mirror may be distorted by cultural norms. So really the diversity of cultures in the United States and around the globe is really fascinating. But we always want to keep in mind that it's our cultural lens that is shaping how we perceive the world. So it makes us think that our behaviors and customs and traditions are perfectly normal, and it can distort our perception of other cultures. And that's something that we want to be cognizant of, realizing that we have this filter through which we are perceiving reality, and we want to be careful that it doesn't lead to some, negative consequences. It's very subjective, and as I mentioned, it can lead to sort of inaccurate perceptions of others, which in turn may grow into actual stereotyping of groups of people and all kinds of problems related to cultural misunderstanding. So, as educators and language learners um, encounter cultural difference, they really want to always be mindful that their perception of reality is not necessarily, you know, um, correct. That it is absolutely subjective and a result of the socialization that they have experienced. And in order to create um, greater intercultural competence, we have to be aware of that. So, instead of having this sort of narrow-minded perception that sees things only through our own cultural lens, we want to be more open-minded. We want to accept differing worldviews and realize that that's a really important part of second language learning. If you have ever lived internationally and tried to learn the language, you probably remember that anytime you harbored a lot of negativity or judgmental attitudes about your host country or the citizens of that country, it really stymied and suppressed your ability to gain proficiency in the language because you probably sought out other Americans and you weren't open to the possibilities of accepting the culture and then learning the language. We know that acceptance of cultural differences correlates very highly with greater success in second language learning. So it's important to think about the stages of culture acquisition. If we know that learning a second culture helps us to learn a second language, um, it's important that we keep in mind that most individuals will go through these stages of culture acquisition. The first is excitement. Wow, I'm in this new place. Isn't this fascinating? The sights, the smells, the sounds, the traditions all seem very exotic and appealing, and we're just ecstatic. That can give way to a period of culture shock when the novelty of the experience is beginning to wear off a little bit. And at this point, we are seeing the differences in the way that our own culture and this new host culture, we're seeing how they clash perhaps. There are things about the culture that we don't understand. There seems to be some hidden aspects of it that are perplexing to us. And at this stage, we perhaps are homesick and want to return to our home, or we may become a little more reclusive because we are overwhelmed by the experience. And I guess it's been about 12 years ago that I got to witness this firsthand when we hosted an exchange student from Ecuador, a young man who at the time was about 18 years old. He came and lived with us for a year and went to our local high school. And for the first couple of months, he just thought he was overwhelmed by, or excited rather, by everything: football and pep rallies and all the fast food that he could eat and even the sort of go, go, go nature of life in the US was exciting to him. But after a couple of months, I could see that The novelty had worn off, and he was just beginning to be a little bit worn down. And he thought that Americans were rude and that we rushed all around all the time, and that we didn't eat good. The food choices weren't the healthiest. He was used to living on eating lots of fresh seafood, and he was getting probably a little too much hamburger helper at my house. I don't know, but he was not in that excited stage anymore. He was definitely experiencing a little bit of stress from his time here. Fortunately, he didn't leave. He persevered and he moved on to the recovery stage. And at this point, he was able to be a bit more objective. Yes, there were some great things about American culture, and in this case, it was more suburban culture in the southern part of the United States. There were some great things about it, there were some negatives about it. And he could also see that there were some great things about his home and native culture and some things that weren't so great. And he was sort of able to come to terms with these differences. And interestingly enough, I observed that at this point, his language proficiency in English really took off. And he really seemed, once he sort of got that in balance, his communicative competence increased substantially. And eventually he made it to this stage of acculturation where he realized that his experiences here had changed him. Not that he had abandoned the cultural norms that he was raised with, but that he had accepted some of the American cultural influences and come to terms with it all. In fact, after his year here, he went back to Ecuador for the summer and then decided to come and earn his college degree in the United States. And now, 12 years later, he spends his time between both countries. So, what does this mean for what we do in the classroom? If we want to really help students gain intercultural competence, accept a second culture, knowing that that's going to enhance their language learning, then we want to be sure that we are valuing all customs and belief systems that students come to us with, right? And we want to help them see how their perceptions are shaped by their cultural norms and keep that in mind so that they can avoid stereotyping. And we want to show them that we value their native language, even as they are learning English, and we want them to draw upon what they can in their home language to assist in their English development. As educators, we want to be aware of how different collectivist and individualist cultural influences can shape the behavior of our students. It might shape the way they interact with their peers. It might shape the way they learn in the classroom, their perceptions of us as educators. And ultimately, anytime we are drawing upon the diversity of backgrounds in our students, we are fostering intercultural competence. So this was just a brief overview of culture, the role of culture and its influences on second language learning. I invite you to ask any questions now, and I hope we can generate a bit of discussion. Thanks so much.